What's the last time you had a disagreement with someone that was not your spouse?
If we can get really real, my last argument was actually with someone around this table.
Wow, this is getting so real so fast. It wasn't me though, right?
It wasn't you.
Okay,
It was,
who else could it be? I'm going to ask a question that people are earning to ask. They might even be getting frustrated.
I hope this doesn't make all of our listeners mad.
What does a win look like in those conversations?
Hey, this is how you almost like fight fair, if you will.
And I think that's what this whole conversation is about, is what is a win? Today on the Live Change podcast, we're going to be talking about disagreements. Specifically, we're going to give you the tools to be able to win every single disagreement. But I have news for you. Chances are you're going to have to change what a win looks like. That's what we're talking about today. And I'd like to welcome back to the Live Change podcast, Matt Parks.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. Thanks for letting me come back again.
Dude, I was so glad that you're back. And always Joanna. And today we're talking about like disagreeing. But I want to first let's talk about a disagreement you've had. Now, I'm going to get it out of the way, not with your spouse, okay? Because we always go right to spouses. And I want to say, what's the last time you had a disagreement with someone that was not your spouse?
You know, I was thinking about that. I can't remember the most recent one, but I can remember the worst one. In my senior year of college, I was a student body president at our college. And so we had planned this big event, and I'd done a ton of work to make this event happen. There was a staff member who I disagreed with his behavior and treatment of a guest, and it actually got so heated that in my passion and in my immaturity, I stormed into the president's office of the college and basically called him out for not leading and used some language that was inappropriate for a college president. He kicked me out of his office, and it totally blew up. It was a big deal. I actually keep part of what was created that day in my house just to remind me to do this better than I did just then, because it was bad. It was really bad.
Okay, so passions got the better of you.
Oh yeah. Passion, justice, what was right, defending someone.
Oh.
And I was ready to throw down. And so, yeah.
Joanna?
Yeah, so before I was on staff at LCBC, I actually worked in retail.
Oh, okay.
And so you could imagine how many disagreements you find yourself oftentimes with customers. And the old adage, the customer is always right, isn't necessarily right. And so anyway, I remember specifically witnessing two people fight over a sweatshirt on Black Friday because that was the only thing their daughters wanted.
Oh, my word.
And anyway, yeah, it didn't really.
But you know something, well. you hit at that. So two people were ready to go to fisticuffs over a black sweatshirt. But what's interesting is that black sweatshirt would long since be gone. You know
my gosh. I mean? It's not even in style today.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But it seems so important at the time.
And
I
my
think
word.
That's what
and
we're
I just was like, neither of you get to have it. I'm going to sell this to someone else today. You don't deserve it.
I love how maternal you got with the customers. Look, I hope you're satisfied. Now no one's going to get it.
Did you seriously take the sweatshirt away from them?
Yeah, it was like
a toddler timeout?
Yeah, it's ladies, this is not how we're going to shop in here today.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
I've had weird disagreements over the years, political disagreements and stuff like that. I did have one disagreement one time at a Costco. That is a place that's just made for disagreements.
Like what?
Yeah, with
what did you
with
do?
who?
Do you get the 5,000 pack or the 500 pack?
I
what were
was
you arguing
walking
over?
past someone, and this isn't as much a disagreement as I think I was almost beat up. I was walking out of the Costco, but I was not, I didn't buy anything. I had just gotten my membership renewed, and I was walking around to walk in. Well, some gentleman who was having a very bad day felt like I was butting. And I was like, no, I just want to go around. I'm not checking. I'm not leaving the store. I'm just going around. And he was like, no, you're not. And I was like, and all of a sudden this emotional feeling of
oh my goodness.
Wait, is this a fight?
Who are you to stop me? Yeah.
And I was said, I'm sorry, sir, you're having a bad day. He's like, you're about to have a bad day. And I was like, oh,
yikes.
It was, and you know what I did? I got in line.
Could we do another episode on how to leave Costco without buying anything?
Yeah.
Because that feels like a feat in and of itself. Anyway.
You know what I did? I waited in line, I walked out, and then I still bought stuff at Costco because I do love a good deal.
Did we say that it's $100 to walk into Target?
Yeah.
Like you can't walk out of Target with a
Yeah.
less than $100.
And they know it.
Yeah.
But you know something, that gentleman's story that I told, you know, it wasn't high stakes because I don't know him. I don't have any relationship with him. He doesn't know me. And we weren't talking about anything all that passionately. But there is some subjects that we talk about that are super high stakes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Costco exits, not super high stakes. Even with the, like, you know, sometimes like the sweatshirt, not super high stakes. But what are the areas where people disagree with most that start to get to a little more high stakes? What are some of those areas that you guys find usually leads up to disagreements?
I mean, I'll tell you the areas that whenever the subject comes up, I'm like, oh my goodness, like how do I like walk the landmines? So like politics, like I'm dreading another year of elections coming up because you're just like, are you a safe person to ask questions with, or are you like dogmatic and ready to beat your view over? Like, are you ready to like beat me down with your view? And I'm just like,
Yeah. That's that passion
Yep.
that everyone feels like it's 1,000 degrees. But I'd say one of the biggest things is when the disagreements are with family and close people, because now it's high stakes because guess what's on the line? We slide onto the center of the poker table, a relationship. So now it's high stakes because this disagreement is no longer about sweatshirts. It's no longer a college professor you're not going to be close with. And it's not some dude at Costco. It's a relationship. And that's where I really want to talk about the disagreements today, because I don't think anyone needs to get better about talking to the guy at Costco. But I think we all need to get better about talking to our neighbors, our friends, our family, the people across the road, whatever it might be, our coworkers, because that's when the disagreements involve relationships that we put on the table and we run the risk of losing. So I think the first part of talking about this is don't go having conversations, don't face life where it's like going into a war zone and you almost have to put on that armor, put on that, you know, relationship with Jesus Christ before you have anything. Because anything you say when you're not in an intimate relationship with Jesus, when you're not in a healthy place with Jesus, anything you say, or at least let's just put it, Chad, anything I say is at risk of being from Chad, not from Jesus. And when it's coming from Chad, it can be coming from a very unhealthy place. Yeah. And I might be fighting an argument that I don't even believe in just because I want to be right, because I am not in a good place.
So if we can get really, really, really real, my last argument was actually with someone around this table. And it actually happened last Thursday.
Wow.
And I know. That's
wow, this is getting so real so fast.
But I feel
it wasn't
like
me, though, right?
I say what?
It wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
Okay.
It was,
who else could it be?
So last Thursday, I found myself, Joanna leads our communications here. I wanted to do something at our campus. I had this idea. I believed in it. I was excited about it. I was passionate about it. I called her. I was like, hey, we need to do this thing. It's like time urgent. We got to go for it now. And she's a marketing genius. Like, this is her profession. She's the expert. I'm a pastor. I do theology, not marketing. And so she real kindly was like, hey, let me take it back to the team. We'll talk about it. She called me back. She goes, hey, I've got 15 other ways that are better than that idea. Let's explore one of those ways. I found myself all of a sudden shaking.
Wow.
Like shaking with anger.
Why?
And I'm like, I was like ready to defend my idea. I was ready to defend why I was right. I was ready to defend why she doesn't understand and she doesn't know the campus and it's Central's distance and they're removed. And I had all of these thoughts going through my head about why she was wrong and I was right. And as I'm like literally like shaking, all of a sudden, like I just had this moment of like, why is this such a big deal? Like, why am I reacting so much? And as I just, you know, finally, after getting this wrong so many times and getting kicked out of the president's office, I finally realized in that moment, like, just be quiet, say yes, ma'am, and hang up, and then figure out why I'm shaking, and then figure out next. And what I realized was my insecurities got triggered, my enoughness got triggered, my scarcity mindset, all of Matt's issues got triggered. It was nothing that she said. And so a day later, I'm like, that's actually the right idea. And it was all of me. And so I think sometimes we get into these things where we are just going to town on a disagreement when it has nothing to do with the validity of the conversation. It has everything to do with something internally that we've just not been willing to address. Like, I was scared to say I felt like a bad leader. I felt like a bad strategist. I felt like I wasn't a good creative. All of a sudden, like, my ideas are not good. Yes. That's what I was scared of. I was trying to prove myself, not do what's best for the campus.
And here's an opportunity that we so rarely get to do is, Joanna, at any point, did you think he was a bad leader? Did you think his ideas were bad? Did you think any of the lies?
Well, she thought the idea was bad because she said no to it. But like...
But did you think any of the things that he thought you thought?
No.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, totally. Because it's funny, like even our own team probably comes up with 100 different ideas every day, or, just like in our line of work, and most of them aren't good. And so,
oh, it's true. It's so true.
It's funny because like that's what I went to was like, oh my gosh, like Matt, we could do this 1,000 different ways. And anyway, it was like you're being very generous with like our marketing expertise, but it's like, we want to wade into it together, and it had nothing to do with like Matt's enoughness or some of the things that he shared.
And at the end of the day, it's like 8-year-old fatty Maddie trying to be like, can I make the team?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, am I enough to be chosen? Like, am I enough to belong here?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But I was like a frog's hair from being like, taking Joanna and making her represent all of Central, all of her department, and be like, they don't get us. Mm-hmm. They don't understand. They're like, and all of a sudden just like, it's like just making the whole thing bad and burning it down because of me.
And you said you used the term fatty Maddie. That's something from your childhood.
Oh yeah. That's my childhood like nickname. Yeah, I was a fat kid. So
man.
Yeah. We all have our childhood scars that we go through.
So that's the persona that you put on when you're in that weekend's vulnerable state. It's that kid that got picked on.
I mean, all of us. It's if you dig into counseling, like most of our involuntary flighting triggers come from some childhood trauma, some childhood belief system of we either have to defend ourselves, we have to prove ourselves, we have to find ourselves noticeable, like whatever it was as a child. Yep. Like I remember one time my wife and I were in an argument and she just looked at me and she goes, I'm not talking to 35-year-old Matt, I'm talking to 8-year-old Matt. So how do I help 8-year-old Matt feel safe so I now can talk to 35-year-old Matt?
Wow.
And I'm like, thanks for being smarter than I am and wiser than I am. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I would say like similarly, I think a lot in Kevin and I's relationship too. Because when you're closer in your closest relationships, they also know more about you, but also sometimes they still don't understand it. And so we've had to have some of those conversations too when we're in a disagreement that then you realize, or I realize, oh my goodness, I just put all of this on you that like, I'm not actually even mad at you. Like I'm mad at this other thing from my childhood or previous experiences that I've had that just feel like what's happening right now. And like, you're right. It's like that fight or flight or that like, you just like mentally transport somewhere else and you're not even in the same conversation you started in.
So it really just goes back to the fact that unless Jesus is dealing with our scars, like we're not safe to be really having these kind of conversations. We're we're gonna screw those conversations up, especially the high stakes one, if we're not talking to Jesus first, because everything gets put into its perspective. Even those dear women that were fighting over the sweatshirt probably could later go back and go like, I was not right that day.
Yeah.
Something was not going well for me that day.
Yeah.
So,
because if you're not following Jesus, you fight the wrong fights. You fight for the wrong victories. Yeah. And so many times we're fighting to win the sweatshirt. We're fighting to protect ourselves. When we follow Jesus and we have a global, eternal perspective, all of a sudden we're realizing, what ultimately matters here? Yeah. Because right now I'm going to win this little battle, but lose what matters most.
So, and those are the disagreements I find myself the most bummed to be a part of, is like when the relationship didn't make it through. Because then it's like, man, like we missed it.
Yep.
And so like, I know, like I can even think of a couple scenarios for me personally that it's like, I really wanted to figure it out, but we couldn't get over the hump, I guess, of what had happened, to recognize that we weren't probably even fighting each other, we weren't fighting each other. We were fighting a thing and we couldn't get past the thing to remember that we were, the thing against the problem, not us against each other.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and that leads me to this question is like, let's describe situations where people have slid the relationship. Have you seen it in your lives where people slid the relationship onto the table? They gambled with the relationship by having a disagreement. They maybe even won the disagreement, but lost the relationship.
Oh my word. So I hope this doesn't make all of our listeners mad. I can't stand politics.
Sure.
If who is in the White House changes how you live in your house, then you have missed the mark. Like, you have missed what it means to follow Jesus. Who's in the White House does not change how I treat people in my house. And that drives me nuts. And so during 2020, whenever all of that craziness was going on, I could not comprehend families falling apart because of someone miles away that they would never see. All of a sudden, you're like burning bridges and like cutting people out because they vote different than you or think about things different than you or have different burdens than you.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh man, that is so short-sighted to me. And
Yeah.
Just
And
you're missing what matters most.
So politics is definitely one that we've
yeah.
seen families that don't talk
Yeah.
because of political disagreements.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I know that I have extended family in my family that don't talk, and they haven't for years, sometimes over a decade. They don't talk. Like Aunt so-and-so and Uncle so-and-so, we don't see them anymore. We don't talk to them anymore.
Yep.
And 9 chances out of 10, the disagreement, either people can't even remember what it was about, or they do remember it was about, and it was stupid.
Yeah.
But talk about cashing in something of great value for something worthless. It is the epitome of cashing in a brand new Tesla for a bag of beans. Mm-hmm. It is like, I won the argument. I'm going to show this person. I'll never talk to them again. You traded in a relationship with another human being or multiple human beings or generations of human beings for a worthless victory or a pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joanna, you're talking earlier about working in retail. Mm-hmm. I worked retail for a short season, and we had, like, behind closed doors, we had all the things we wish we could say to the customers, but you couldn't say to the customers. And one of our things that we would joke about is like, hey, the louder you yell, the more I want to help you. Like, the more you scream at me, the more I want to go out of my way for you.
Yeah.
And as followers of Jesus, if our ultimate calling is to be ambassadors for Christ and to represent him to this hurting world, the more we scream at people, it doesn't help them see Jesus. So, like, my friends who vote differently than me, like, I got opinions on my voting patterns. I vote with conviction. I got opinions on all of the issues you brought up earlier. But what matters most to me is I got to represent Jesus to them. And if I am shouting at them, they're just going to stop listening to me.
Well, and you're just distorting their view of Jesus.
Totally.
And so, like, I think just remembering, like, if we really are the representation, people are painting that on us a lot of times, especially when they know that that's like our worldview. And then we're just completely distorting ever having a chance of them knowing the Jesus that we say that we know.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just really sad. Cause even with like the family disagreements, I can definitely think of scenarios where it's like your behavior doesn't match who you say you are. And it's like, that is really tough for me to reconcile. When it comes to the cost, like some of it is like the cost of your relationship or the cost of other people's relationship with Jesus, not just your relationship with that person.
It's the loss of opportunity.
Yes. Yep.
The opportunity. And I have a friend of mine had a squabble with some neighbors, and their squabble over something, I'm not even going to say it because it was so silly. They became like it was such animosity between these two families, like Hatfields and McCoy's level animosity. And at one point, the one family said to the other, like, if this is what Christians look like, I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was, and that literally was uttered, verbally uttered. And I'm like, wow.
Like we talked on the last podcast about when I get to heaven, the thing that I want to hear the most is, well done, good and faithful servant. And I don't think Jesus is going to ask me, how did I vote? I don't think Jesus is going to ask me how I fought. I think he's going to ask me, how did I show love? How did he shine through me?
Yep.
And I think we got to remember that eternity is coming. And so how do I represent eternity in this moment and not get trapped in this moment as it's the most important thing?
But now I'm gonna ask a question that people that are burning to ask. They might even be getting frustrated.
Okay.
Because like that's all well and good. It's all well and good. But you know something? What if I have these internal, sincere, vibrant convictions, and I feel like I'm doing a disservice to not talk about my convictions or correct the misconceptions that are out there. So if like I'm with a bunch of coworkers and they're of a political party or of a persuasion or whatever it might be, and I have my own personal convictions, and I feel like by not representing them, not saying them, not talking about them, I'm doing some sort of a disservice to them. And maybe some people feel like they're doing a disservice to God because they're not saying that, hey, that's wrong. I don't agree with that. So what do you say to that person that, whilst they might save the relationship and not get in a fight, they feel like cowardice because their convictions were hidden in a backpack?
Well, I just think that that's us assuming that everyone has to hold the same convictions. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's the way that it always works. And I think that there are so many other ways to show advocacy or your point of view or wading into the conversation through activating in different ways, whether that's like go support that, like go physically go support the organization that you're talking about or the thing that you're advocating for or want to change someone's perspective on, versus just trying to talk other people into having the same perspective as you. Like we are all individuals with individual perspectives. We might even hold some of the same convictions with different perspectives on it. And so sometimes I think we just try to get everyone to like replicate what we think and want to hold tight to. And I don't think that that's possible. And so then we get frustrated and then that's when the stakes get high because we just want to fight about it.
Yep. And a lot of people in those situations, they want to take that verse where it says, you might have to help me, where it's like, if you deny me before men, I'll deny you before God. What is that verse? You guys know which one I'm talking about? There's one that you say it on Facebook is like, hey, if you're ashamed of me before men, I'll be ashamed of you before the Father. There's something to that effect. So they throw that out there like, if I'm not bold for Jesus, then I'm not following Jesus. And I think where a misconception happens, or dare I say an immaturity of faith happens, is we apply that to a specific topic or a situational moment when I believe Jesus made it real clear, they'll know you by my love. They'll know you by your love. They'll know you by your love. They know you by your love. And so it's like, if you deny me before others by not showing them love, then you miss the whole point.
And, Matt, I think what you're getting at there, what I really appreciate is the fact that when we have these disagreements with these people, we think the louder we get, like you said, in with the customer service, the louder we get, the more convincing the debate, the more, convincing the argument, we'll turn them. That has never worked in my entire life. Like, unless you're some sort of master Oxford level debater, and even then, I don't see those people turning people away from their opinions. You know where I see the most of that happening is in the subtle, silent, quiet way we live and the compelling way that we live. I find that turns more persuasions, and ultimately, Jesus does it. Mm-hmm. I find that I rarely get people to change how they live, but Jesus does. And I show them Jesus through how I live. Yep. Does that make sense? So
Totally.
So,
one of the things you made me think about was one of my favorite classes in seminary. We talked about what is a mature Christian? What is someone who is fully following Jesus and is matured in their faith? And so the professor had several things that we talked through, but one is he drew 3 concentric circles on the board. And on the middle one, he wrote dogma. The second tier, he wrote doctrine. Last tier, he wrote preference. And he said someone who is mature in their faith, who's grounded in their faith, they know what the absolute essential is of their faith, what matters the absolute most. They then know the doctrine, which is their opinion, like the clumpings of what allows them to connect with other believers. And they know it's just their personal preferences. And so as someone who is mature, we should know what belongs in all 3 of those. And the danger is whenever we make everything dogmatic or we make everything preferences. And I think in arguments and in disagreements, if you don't know what truly is essential and what matters most, all of a sudden you can sacrifice something that is a second tier importance for, like you can sacrifice what's first tier importance for something that's second tier importance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because I think sometimes also what happens then is we assume that even we need to get everyone on board with that when they don't believe anything on those 3 circles in the same way that you do. And so it's funny because I think in a lot of, especially like the hot topic disagreements, it's like we will probably always fundamentally disagree because one of us is a follower of Jesus and one of us isn't. Mm-hmm. And so like, I think there's even times where we're just starting even out of a different like playbook, for lack of a better example, that then it's like unfair. Like we're just going to keep arguing about it. But like even what's in the center circle or, whatever is completely different, that like, we're just going to fight until we're blue in the face and we might not likely change anything, but now we're like less friends.
And I think Jesus speaks into all of the things we mentioned earlier, all of the hot topics. Jesus speaks into them. And I don't think it's our job to convince them of each individual topic that they should feel a certain different way, especially if they don't know Jesus. Like, I love what you said, Joanna, is like Jesus comes first. And we do anything to be able to introduce people to Jesus. And we shouldn't expect them to fall under Jesus' expectations of things if they don't know him. And so many of us get into these disagreements with people that don't know Jesus, expecting that they're going to live a life that looks and emulates Jesus Christ when they don't know Jesus.
And what they do need the most is what Jesus said they should see in us the most, which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Like he tells us that's the fruit of the spirits in Galatians 5. And so if we're debating and you don't feel loved in the debate, I've lost the debate.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like there's patience in me, I've lost the debate. Like, if you feel there's self-control, if you feel like there's patience, if you feel like there's kindness, then all of a sudden I'm showing you what matters most, even if we disagree on whatever we're talking about.
Totally.
So now going from that, like, I think that we hit at something, but I want to just, before we talk about how to handle a disagreement and a quarrelsome person, how do we check the what's the true nugget of the conversation that we're having? How do you recommend someone figure out what am I really fighting for? What am I really feeling? What is the emotion I'm having? What is you said the childhood nickname? How do we do that before we get ourselves, over our skis in a disagreement with someone? Because I think it's easy to say, well, like figure out, what you're really feeling or what you're really fighting about. But I think it's really hard sometimes, like especially with families where they're having a fight about what to do with grandma's quilt, but it has nothing to do with grandma's quilt.
Totally.
Like, how do you expect people to get to the nugget of what we're actually fighting about and ultimately what can heal a family or a relationship or a friendship or those kind of things?
Well, it's interesting. So when you were just talking about fruits of the spirit, we've been talking about that in our household, even with Finn, because he has just had a couple of moments recently where a disagreement or something that hasn't gone quite his way at school is just really making him angry. And so it's funny because I think even in those moments, whether it's like him in a disagreement with his friend or how he thinks his teacher should respond to fill in the blank thing, it's like we've been asking him, like, why are you angry about this? And so it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to sin in anger.
Yep.
And so then we've been talking about like, hey, this is how you almost like fight fair, if you will, where it's like, Finn, self-control, I think, is something that we need to work on right now. And here's what we think that could help look like. And so we've been asking a lot of questions around, hey, why is this thing making you angry? And it's been great conversation. And sometimes we even get to that it's like not even connected to the other thing. Like you were just saying, like with the quilt example. But in the heat of the moment, he can't see it. And so anyway, sometimes I think it's like trying to figure out a lot of questions. And even like you shared in our example, like you had to ask yourself a lot of questions around like, what is this tripping up in me?
Yep.
And I know I've had that like moment too, that it's like, yeah, why is my gut choosing this like fight or flight like in this way?
And you can only get that when you surround yourself with people who draw that out of you.
Yes, 100%.
And if you surround yourself and you only listen to avenues that fuel anger and fuel fight and fuel that bitterness and that resentment towards each other, then that's what becomes natural. But if you hang out with people and you surround yourself with people who are helping you pause and helping you reflect and helping you say, man, why did you act that way? Tell me more. Like, why does this matter so much to you? It's only in that community, I think, that gets drawn out. So like the only reason I knew to keep my mouth shut in our conversation was because I didn't keep my mouth shut with my wife for the last 18 years. And we've been doing the work to learn how to fight better whenever those feelings are stirred.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's where in a disagreement, whether it's in the moment with the person or after the fact when we're still heated from it, like if your community around you is just an echo chamber, you will likely continue to be stuck in this commiserate versus being around people who can help you see it differently to help you do it better or different next time. And so I think that that's like challenging even when, you're in that like venting mode, right? Where it's like, hey, am I actually just commiserating with someone who can't help me make the situation or the argument better? Or am I surrounding someone that's going to say, hey, I'll let you vent for 5 minutes and then I'm going to give you my perspective and like help you get outside of yourself to see it from just not what's best for you.
Which goes back to one of the things Mitchell has said, teaching before, that, we're so afraid to evaluate the people around our lives. And he said there's a difference in using wise judgment and being judgy. And I think we have to have good judgment about who are those people around us that are echoing and drawing things out of us. And so we have to steward that, or we only, we will cultivate more and more anger and resentment and bitterness, or we can put people around us who help us grow the fruit of the Spirit, where when we're pushed, love comes out, patience comes out, peace comes out.
So, and this is a great thing for, especially as we enter into, different holiday seasons and you see family and the political arena gets heated. We need to surround ourselves with positive voices that are going to cause us to think like Jesus, to be like Jesus. And also reflecting on not trusting any voice that leads us away from that.
Yep.
So I have to sometimes watch to make sure that I'm not flooding my mind with commentary that makes me want to fight other people. Not flooding myself with the voices that make me look at family members as the enemy, because it's not leading me towards Jesus. And you think to yourself, well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I believe them. I agree with them. If it is not leading you to being more like Jesus, more loving, more peaceful, more gracious, then it is not from Jesus. And that's hard to swallow sometimes, especially if it's a political commentary or something like that.
Dude, this is a silly story, but I can't watch scary movies anymore. Because when I watch scary movies, I respond out of fear. And when I was a kid, my parents had gone out for a walk. I didn't realize they had left. Next thing I know, someone's knocking on the front door. My sister shouts, "There's a big scary man at the front door." Well, I go into Rambo Protecto mode, and I'm grabbing a crossbow, and I'm dropping behind the couch with the crossbow ready to drop the intruder. And then all of a sudden, my mama's face pops in the door, and I'm like, I am so grounded right now. And what I realized was I was responding to all that input of fear movies, not to the reality of, hey, mom and dad said they were going for a walk. They told us they were leaving. I just wasn't paying attention. Wow. It's mom and dad. And I think so many times because of what we've put in, that's what we respond out of.
And if we put in that everyone that disagrees with us is a monster, all we will see is monsters.
Totally. Absolutely.
Including at Thanksgiving dinner.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons why I loved what David did, our former senior pastor did during 2020 when we had all of the race tensions. He said, you have to go make a friend. And he had every campus pastor, we actually had to intentionally go make a friend who was different than us in some way, form, or fashion, to take it from being them to being, oh no, that's Rob, that's Blake. And I'm sitting with them and I'm getting coffee with them and I'm getting to know them. Oh, that's Alex. We're doing life together. Because whenever it goes from all of this nebulous input to know that's a person, that's a story, they're different than me, I want to hear why they act that way, it changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
But now when people are heading into different, relationships, there's going to be quarrelsome people. Mm-hmm. Now you can go in with all the best of intentions, but we do enter into scenarios that are unavoidable. Maybe it's a family situation, or maybe you live next to your next door neighbor and it's a quarrelsome person that wants to goad you and poke at you. How do we prepare for those kind of conversations? How do we ready ourselves for those kind of conversations? And what does a win look like in those conversations? Because if we go in to win just like society tells us to win, then we just want to win the most points and we want to make them look stupid. But if that's not what Jesus tells us to do, then what are we supposed to do as we ready ourselves to have difficult conversations?
Well, I think sometimes you have to decide whether you're going to have the conversation or not.
That's fair. And
so I think especially if it's a repeat scenario or just you've been down this road now a couple of different times. I think even for me, there have been times where I've had to say, hey, you know what? I actually can't help you with this. I don't see it quite the way that you do. We're going to have to maybe agree to disagree, or I can try to take as many steps towards you as possible in the conversation. But at the end of the day, I can't keep having the same thing over and over again. So I think sometimes we have to ask ourselves, do we need to draw a boundary, even if it's with someone in close proximity? So again, maybe it doesn't mean that we're not even friends anymore, but it's just hey, I can't, this topic, we can't touch that topic anymore.
There's also times I just don't tell them my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like why does my opinion matter to this?
Yeah.
Like if you're just wanting to soapbox, if you just want to like tell me all about your news reports, if you're just wanting me to hear your opinions, cool. I'll listen. Then I'll change the topic as soon as I can.
Yeah.
But you can usually tell pretty quick if they're wanting to have a discussion to grow and to learn, or if they're wanting to get into an argument. And there's times that I'll meet with someone, they'll start giving me their opinion, and they don't have a clue what I believe. And they don't know that I may disagree with them completely.
Mm-hmm.
And what about the situations where it's not about opinions, but something is required of you? So there's some siblings out there that are dealing with like mom and dad's estate, or maybe there's a high tension situation because grandma doesn't see the grandkids enough and she's getting frustrated, or when there is like it has to be discussed. You can't put boundaries around it.
Yep.
Like you're gonna have to talk about it. How do you enter into those kind of conversations, and what are some strategic tips to kind of those high stakes conversations where it's not about politics, but it's about like real world, high stakes, crucial conversation kind of stuff? How do you prepare for those kind of conversations?
Do you guys remember Simon Sinek? He spoke at the Global Leadership Summit a couple of times. Does that name ring a bell for you guys?
Yes, I do.
So he did a talk years ago that has just profoundly impacted me. It's called The Golden Circles. And again, 3 concentric circles. And he wrote why, how, and what. And he said that whenever we get into these conversations, we have to agree on why before we ever talk about how or what we're doing. And so many times we just want to talk about what we want or how we want to go about it, and we never agree on why it even matters. Yeah. And so for me, when I think about some of the conflicts that I've had with people, we just have to keep going back to like, why does this matter? Why does this matter? Why does this matter? Why does this matter? Do we agree that matters? Now let's make sure that we win with that mattering. And so like whenever we think about family drama, my grandpa passed away. We had to divide up some of his land. It was super controversial with some of the neighbors, and we just had to remind ourselves, like, hey, what matters most is we want to honor grandpa, and we want to still be family at the end of the day. So hey, let's stay friends. Let's stay friends. Let's stay friends. Let's stay friends, and then figure out how do we move forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some family members that when someone passes away, it can be a financial thing, and it can be $1,000 that they're fighting over, and they will literally trade in the relationship over that $1,000. And when you put into place what you just said, what truly needs to win, what is a win? And I think that's what this whole conversation is about, is what is a win? I think at the end of the day, a win is that you walk away from a difficult conversation with that other person as still in a relationship, maybe even a better relationship. Maybe they feel seen or heard, but in the end, that Jesus is honored. Yeah. It's that, was I loving? Was I gracious? Was I kind? And maybe you lost the $1,000. Maybe you lost the grandma's quilt. Maybe you lost whatever it was.
But in eternity, what did you gain?
And that's how we go home at night not feeling bad. Because I think when we go home at night, we won the argument, but we still feel like junk. We lay in bed and we're like, gosh, what? And we hate going home, and we hate seeing that neighbor, and we hate going to the break room because that guy's going to be there. But in the end, when we just try, when we try to listen actively, when we try to stay calm, when we try to put what is the most important, what is the hill to truly die on? And the hill to truly die on is that we represent Jesus Christ well, and that includes family. Guess what? That doesn't get a pass because that's your cousin. We have to represent Jesus Christ well, and nothing. We can't put that on the side burner, and that needs to win. That's the hill to die on. Everything else is not a hill to die on.
Which this is going to be one of the most anti-American statements I can say right now. As Americans, my independence, my freedoms, my rights are sadly often more important than my belief in Jesus. And we see that whenever we are defending myself, defending what I think is right and fair and good for me, versus following the example of Jesus and saying, I'm going to lay down my life for you.
That's so true.
And so there's so many times that we forget, no, you're called to die for the other person. You're called to lay down your rights to the other person. You're called to surrender to the other person as an act of love, not die on this moment of I got to get my way. And I think sometimes we realize that we believe more in the American dream than we do in Jesus.
And at the end of life, everything we did in Jesus' name is going to last.
Yeah.
That's what lasts the test of time. So if we're heading into a situation though that can be sensitive, how do we use our words to diffuse the situation? And so I want to give people some healthy ways to actually verbally handle those situations when they feel something real quick that they can think about. be when the heat starts to go up and when the emotions start to go up, because I know sometimes the most common sense, everything you heard in this podcast goes out the door when those emotions start to go up, and when you get cut off and all that common sense just disappears. I want to give something really simple for everyone listening that they can remember, and that is to think. And this is something Jason has hit on with LCBC in the past. And this is think. And I want to unpack some of these here, but think basically means only say it if it's truthful, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind. And so when you see it starting to heat up, think. Think. Like, is it what I'm about to say truthful, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind? And when you filter everything I've ever said stupid to someone, it doesn't pass that. When you put the stupid Chad through that filter, it's blocked. Yeah. Because half the time I say stuff that is quarrelsome, it is either not truthful, it's just not helpful. Man, 90% of my arguments with Steph is when I say stuff that's not helpful. It might be funny, it might be sarcastic, it might be
anything other than helpful.
Just so not helpful, Joanna. So where have you guys seen some of these truthful, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind in your lives and relationships?
Dude, the thing that's hitting me right now is I just keep thinking about, I pick one of these and go with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's true. I got to tell them the truth. Oh man, this is necessary that I say this right now. But then not slow down and say, no, is it all 5? Because if it's not all 5, I just need to keep my mouth shut. Yeah. And that's where it's hard for me to remember to do all of them.
Yeah, it's funny. That's where my brain went to with the truthful, because then you lose like the graceful. And so like even like the kind, like we'll say a lot, even around LCBC, like how conversations with truth and grace. It's not truth or grace or truth. And so anyway, like I think this is just a good reminder that like you have to figure out the right dose of both of those in a conversation. And some conversations might have more truth. Some conversations might have more grace, but they should have both of them. And so I like that this is like also just a good reminder of that.
And then even with the necessary piece, one of the things that I was coached on whenever I was becoming a campus pastor is, we get emails, people disagree with us on stuff, they don't like things. And so sometimes we get these emails that are kind of heated and kind of mean. And my like reactionary gets kicked up and I'm like ready to defend and explain why we did the thing that we did. And like, I'm ready to argue. And I remember Brad Still, who was my former campus pastor, he just said, just answer their question. And he goes, if they don't ask a question, you don't need to respond. And so many times what gets me riled up is people's statements, not their questions. And so there's like when people are saying things at me, I just need to just pause and be like, so what is your question? Because if I didn't hear a question, I can't respond to it. I stood before a school board a couple of years ago to talk about something that we were going to do as a church with the school board. And there was a school board member who was just really angry. And so he goes on this long diatribe. And at the end of it, I just remember like in front of the whole board, just being like, I missed your question. Like as respectfully as possible, I missed your question. And like 4 of the board members laughed because they're like, yeah, he just wanted to be heard.
Wow.
And I was like, so I didn't have to say anything other than, what's your question?
Yeah.
'Cause I'd love to respond to your question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, thinking through the outcome that we want after. And so that's even a little bit of what you shared. Like, why am I entering the conversation? But then what am I hoping for as a result of having it? Because if it's just to say my piece, like that's a very different type of conversation than like, hey, I want to enter a dialogue with you to figure out fill in the blank thing. And so, yeah, I think the necessary piece also just like, what do I hope for once we talk about the thing? Is it just so I can talk, or is it to actually enter a conversation?
Which an interesting thing to think about when you said, I feel like I got to say my piece. Ultimately, that's just selfish.
Yep.
Like it's just serving me. And that's like almost I wonder if that's a filter I should carry forward of like, man, if I feel like I got to say this for my piece, no, I'm just serving me. I'm just serving me.
Yeah.
So putting that, and we'll put this in the show notes, like think. And so, maybe it's something you can print off and put on the fridge and remind your family, teach your family, think is a truthful, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind.
I might need to put it on my own fridge. Yes.
I'm sorry, you're not going to be put to shame. You won't lay in bed at night feeling shameful about what you said if you run it through that filter. By the way, chances are you'll say a lot less. That's a message straight to Chad. Okay.
Well, and don't miss that you can do that ahead of the conversation. I also think sometimes we just go to the conversation without thinking about it ahead of time. Get it? So like,
I just got
it. So act like we can go into conversations prepared too. We don't always have to jump in off the cuff. And typically we do that because the tension feels high or because we feel like we need to react right away, or at least that's how I can feel. And like, that's not true either.
Yep. You know, even talking about preparing for the conversations as we go into the holidays, like you can choose how long you spend with certain people. You can choose which rooms you find yourself with certain people. You get you have more control over some of those situations. And then sometimes we feel like we're the victim of the conversation just because we didn't help put ourselves in the right place for the conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And a real win. So putting that into its final perspective is a true and ultimate win when we're having a conversation with people is that the relationship is held intact. Jesus was honored with how we handled ourselves, and there's still an opportunity for Jesus to have a relationship with that other person. Like that's a win. And so when that's your win, it's a whole lot easier to win. Mm-hmm. If you think about that, like I can't think of many arguments I win because I can never remember fun or crazy things to say to win the argument, or like stats. And other people are like, well, this is what blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know any stats. And I always feel like I'm losing conversations, but I can win every single disagreement by saying, was Jesus honored by how I handled myself? Was Jesus honored by how I treated them? Is there still a chance for Jesus to impact that person's life?
Yep.
And if that's the win, I win. I won today. I won Thanksgiving. Hooray. So what happens if the damage is already done, though, guys? There's someone listening, and like I haven't talked to that person for 5 years. Or I wish I had heard this earlier because we had the blow up 6 weeks ago and we still haven't spoken, or we're talking, but it's awkward as heck. What do you do? What's the answer for when the damage is already done?
I mean, I think you got to look at what Jesus did for us. He came to us. Like he didn't wait for us to come to him. And I think some of us are waiting for the people that we've had fallout from to come back to us. And Jesus, he's the one who crossed over, put on flesh, came close, stepped into our world, and said, "Hey, I'm coming after you." And so I think we need to go after that person and just say, "Hey, I'm here, and I'm sorry, and I didn't mean. You matter more than what we were talking about. And I'm sorry I lost my perspective."
Wow, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, that is good.
I think for me, it's recognizing that even in restoring the relationship, wanting to do it for the right reasons. I think sometimes I want to restore relationships because I don't like people being mad at me. But I think I need to get my gut right with Jesus and basically say, Jesus loves that person that I'm mad at more than I do. And he doesn't want his children to be quarreling. There's nothing that hurts me as a father more than when my two children fight. It breaks my heart. And I'm like, stop it. Just please be kind to each other because I love you both so much. And it hurts Jesus when we fight.
Yeah.
And I truly, truly believe that when we, even sometimes in his name, fight with people, I think it grieves him. And so I think that's another thing is recognizing that I'm restoring things not just to make myself feel better. I'm restoring things because that's what Jesus asks of me. Because sometimes I don't even want to. Sometimes I don't feel like restoring things because I'm good without that relationship. I don't need her in my life right now. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but you know something? What does Jesus have you do? And it may not be it may not be ever become a friendship again. But has Jesus been honored? Have you restored things? Have you apologized where you could apologize? Have you done what you could do?
Yeah.
So let's tell some stories. I wanted to kind of end with saying, like, let's talk about, because we talked a lot about difficult relationships and stuff. What was a story of a redeemed relationship that to give some hope to all of this in winning disagreements? What is a situation where maybe you won a disagreement because you kept the right things in perspective, or maybe it was a situation where there was a relationship that was broken that was restored, or maybe we just point to you and Joanna and just go like, congratulations, so
We did it, man.
So what are some situations?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know that it's like a fully like redeemed relationship, but just a conversation is just recognizing. So I had a scenario where it felt like I was saying one thing, the other person was hearing it differently. So then their response was different. And definitely like even just chipped away at that like trust or understanding between the two of us. And so it was funny, like we ended up just talking through it because it's like we were too good of a friends to like let what honestly just felt like a miscommunication in the midst of a disagreement, like be the thing that it was like, oh, well, then we can't be friends anymore. And what was funny is like, it was just so much, we still both at the end of the day believed something different. But we were just missing each other.
Yeah.
And so like, I would say like our relationship might even be different today. But like, that's okay because we still have one. Just we were completely missing each other. And so it would have been a complete bummer to just like not have a relationship with this person anymore because what we missed each other on was so fixable. So yeah, that was the example that kind of came to mind.
Oh, I like that.
The one that comes to my mind, I didn't ask permission to share the story, so hopefully grace will be given to me after they hear it. But this last March, my wife and I, we had, out of 18 years of marriage, we had the worst fight of our 18 years this past March. And like, you know, those as a couple where it's just like, it hits the fan, you're going to town, and it's like, you know, like a 4-day fight. And it's just like, every time you see each other, the blood's boiling instantly almost. And it was just over dumb stuff. But for whatever reason, we just got triggered and we got into our negative loop. We got into our negative interpretations. We both stopped thinking and we were just feeling all of our feelings. And what I love about LCBC and what I love about this team is we value counseling. We value being open and honest and authentic and real and that we don't have to pretend to be something we're not. And so I love that we had a counseling appointment scheduled because we value our marriage so much. We want to keep investing in it. And so I love that now, 10, 11 months later, I can't do the math off the top of my head. We laugh at that moment because we've grown through it and we've learned, hey, 18 years in, we're still going to have big fights, but we're going to learn how to value what matters most, to say I'm sorry, to be able to identify where have we kicked in the fight, flight, and freeze, and then how do we help draw each other out of that for what matters most within our marriage.
See, what I love about your story, Matt, is you said you didn't think, you didn't use the acronym THINK. And I think that's so true it's true for every one of our relationships.
Yep.
I think it's true for family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, people you go to school with. If you just think, it is going to alleviate the pain and sounder minds and sounder thoughts will prevail.
But what's so hard is so many times we don't do the hard work internally to ask, is this true? Mm-hmm. We just hear the lies and believe the lies to be true. And then all of a sudden we're responding to the lies that we feel and the lies of misinterpretation versus actually doing the work to say, no, let's find reality here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And that's my hope for everyone that's listening to the podcast today is that they recognize that we are dealing with humans.
Yep.
And humans have passions and they have complex relationships. And every single human you have has a story of that child that inner child that was hurt or that damage or their insecurities or whatever it is. Every single person has the passion and the insecurities and all the things they're dealing with. And we're interacting with them.
Yep.
And Jesus bleeds and loves for each and every person that we're having a conversation with. And ultimately, he wants us to win in those disagreements. And it doesn't mean making our voice the loudest. It means that he is honored by how we handle ourselves, that we show his love and compassion to other people, and that relationship can be restored.
Yeah, because we're going to blink and this life's over.
Yeah.
And we'll have eternity for what matters most.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's a good way to put it. So, and that's our hope and prayer for all of you. As always with the Live Change podcast, we hope and pray that you enjoy it and you share it out with other people. There's probably someone in your life that desperately needs to hear this conversation. By the way, if it's a person that you're having a fight with, do not send them this podcast. Why don't you listen to it and figure it out for yourself first? Always leave comments. You can check out our show notes. But in the end, you're a life changed by Christ now. And that means you're going to have to live that change out.